welcome to all the men and women of the West. I'm Joe here with me, my co-host Dan.
Hello and greetings.
And yeah, we have a semi-still image video up for you guys again. This is a matter that the Kull movie stuff is, well, it doesn't really need many flashy images to start with, because these videos are more an analysis of the themes and ideas within the Kull movie without taking a look at the novelization, which I do now have. We will be doing at some point a reading of the novel of Kull the Conqueror, but that would be more as a book club podcast rather than just doing a scene by scene thing. These are two separate podcasts on the same topic because there are minor differences between book and movie. The book actually brings up Kull's father a little more, which is pretty interesting, though there are some ideas in there that contradict Howard's lore and whatnot, and I prefer Howard's stuff because Howard is the gold standard. That being said, the movie, after the words in the sky type thing with Kevin Sorbo, breaks up into the flaming credits, which, I'm serious, they're in flames. The credits are bursting out of fire. I cannot describe how cool that is.
It beats almost anything.
Yeah. It's one of the best cinematic intros, and it's one of the most Howardian ones, because how do you get more edgelord than that? And Howard, I'm not saying he had his edgelord, he was an edgelord, but he did have a side like that, I guess. But anyways, this is such a fun credit shot. And then we get to Kevin Sorbo's Kull fighting with some of the Black Dragons. That is to say, the bodyguards of King Borna, the royal Praetorians of sorts, of the Volusian Empire. And Volusia, in the actual stories, is a ancient and very powerful empire, ruling over almost a number of kingdoms because it is so large and militant. I believe there are 7 kingdoms in total. And yes, this is where Martin got the idea for 7 kingdoms and where Warcraft got the idea. Basically, the idea of 7 kingdoms derives from Howard. Except these aren't the edgelord kingdoms who complain and whine and cry about each other, like in those pieces of fiction. And yes, I'm going to mock them. I'm sorry, I have to. These kingdoms meant serious business. And there were shadows within the shadows, so to speak. As you had snake men, for example, that would kill and then enslave the souls of kings, so that it really begs the question, who's actually ruling? And of course, I know someone in the comment section is going to say, you guys are just a bunch of conspiracy theorists. Of course the kings of Volusia were ruling over Volusia, not snake men. I'm joking. I have to crack that joke.
But if they're in charge, then they're probably lizards, shape-shifting lizards.
Pardon, come again?
Hey, it's a conspiracy theory that...
Oh yeah, there's someone who keeps commenting that in the comment section in the community tab about that. You've been paying attention to that. Oh my gosh. Anyways, I don't know what to make of that theory that there are real snake men or lizards that are shapeshifting into our world leaders. It just seems weird to me.
But it's a little accurate in Hyboria.
Yeah, and in the Thurian age that precedes Hyboria, yeah. Kull, in this scene, though, we're introduced to the main aspect of the character, which is to say the warrior. Kull is the king archetype, but he's kind of in the same mold as Theoden, king, from Lord of the Rings. Self-doubting, and oftentimes the masochistic shadow king, because the king has 3 real kind of parts to him. You have the king in his fullness, see Aragorn. You have the sadist, which is to say someone like, say, Sauron. or if not Sauron, then I guess you could say Scar from The Lion King. And you have the masochist, Theoden. Or you have Kull. Kull is a character whom, in the original Legendarium, struggles with trying to be the king in his fullness. He has doubts, he has uncertainties, he is often hesitant, insecure, and whatnot. But he's a fascinating character. Pretty much a wild child who was raised in the wild until he was found by a tribe. Then pretty much thrust onto a throne after he became an exile from his people. And he rose to the position of king by blood, and he actually proves himself a really good king. But the problem is he's insecure and uncertain in a way that is very reminiscent of actual historic usurpers and monarchs from history who are unsure of their claim to the throne. You look at Justinian, he was unsure in the same way. Although the difference is Justinian was far more bloodthirsty than Kull. You have the likes of even Napoleon. He had moments of insecurity and uncertainty. The trouble with Napoleon was that he was unsure of his place, also at least because his first wife at least, was not really faithful, and this weakened his confidence in himself in some ways on a personal level. On the other hand, he was always over eager to emphasize his claim to the French throne, which I'm just going to say, when you look at the domestic accomplishments of Napoleon, I'm not counting military, that's its own can of worms, but if you look at the reforms, the legal stuff, the fact that he gave his people decent wages for the first time in centuries, and that he revitalized French civilization, Napoleon had a good claim. Just on those bases. He had a good claim. Much better than most of the Bourbon kings. Because after Louis XIII, you had the Sun King, who was a disaster, and then you had Louis XV, who was a disaster, and then you had 16, who was a disaster. So Napoleon is looking pretty good compared to them.
Yeah.
But Kull is insecure in that same way. He is a very good ruler, but he's insecure. Now, as the warrior, he's never insecure. He's always proud of his accomplishments, and he's got good reason to brag because, well, look at how great a king he is, and look how great a fighter he is. At the start of this film, though, they introduced the idea that there is a slight insecurity within his warrior side, which it's not something that overclouds the film. It's more subtle and nuanced and in the background. And that has to do with the whole axe versus sword thing. The idea in the film is that axes are, well, Taligaro the general, who is one of the main villains of the film, claims axes are only good for chopping wood, which that epitomizes the sentiments that the Volusian nobility have. Swords are, and spears and arrows are the weapons of warriors. Axes are the weapons of barbarians. They're only good for chopping wood. There's a snobbery there. But there's a stupidity in some ways as, well, axes could be a good weapon. In a lot of ways, throughout history, axes have occasionally been better than Western swords. Not occasionally, actually a lot of the time. This is not like, say, katanas, which were good sidearms for the samurai, who were primarily archers, but when it push came to shove, they adored their swords because their swords were fine quality. In the West, we didn't always make swords of as fine quality. And I know people might say that's a stereotype, but it's a fact. We all know it. The stereotype is there for a reason. That being said, Kull is struggling with the fact that he likes his double-headed axe, but he needs to be accepted by Volusia. At least for the moment. So he ends up kind of with great 90s, I guess, heavy metal, rock? I don't really care. Great music in the background, roaring and bellowing and knocking morons and idiots into the local lake, which, good on him. He's living out his dream of being Hercules from Hercules' Legendary Journeys.
Yes, can't argue with that, because Hercules in there was awesome.
Yeah. But what I like is that in this film, Kull actually does use swords and axes and whatnot. He does fight. He does kill. He's nothing like Hercules from the show. I know people say the two characters are so much alike because Kevin Sorbo plays them, but no. Kull is very different. He's portrayed very differently. He's acted very differently. And he does rely on his weapons. He can't just martial arts his way through or rely on super strength like Hercules does. It's important to remember at the beginning of the movie that this is supposed to be a training exercise. It's a mock battle to keep everybody, the mercenaries who serve as essentially mercenary bodyguards in the same way that the Varangians served in the Byzantine Empire, and the Black Dragons, who are the Praetorians, all sharp and whatnot, by having them fight each other. They're not supposed to kill each other, they're just supposed to give each other a hard time, so to speak. The trouble is that Kull comes very close to crossing a certain line and actually decapitating one of the soldiers, who's very visibly grateful that the horn calling off the battle just happened to sound and Kull stopped. Because you could tell Kull nearly got carried away. Because the original Kull stories depicts Kull as a berserker. And that is something this film stays very true to. In terms of the characterization, for the most part, Kull is almost entirely accurate to the short stories and whatnot. And, of course, right now he's trying to make it into Cobra Kai. I mean, the Black Dragons. I have to crack that joke because Terry Silver's actor happens to be General Taligaro, the general who's the villain in this movie. This is
Did he fight in Nam?
Yeah, I was about to crack that joke. Back in yeah. But this is probably in my opinion, some of the best acting Ian Griffith does, because Thomas Ian Griffith is a great actor. But he's just someone who he doesn't have the largest filmography. But you can tell he's really good at what he does. His best role was probably Cobra Kai's Terry Silver. I say Cobra Kai because he's better in there than in Karate Kid 3. Though he's quite good in there, too. But the trouble is the last season of Cobra Kai was... Oof. But... I only say that because I wish they had a multi-season thing with Terry Silver. Build him up even more as a villain. But season 4 was perfect with him. But in this movie, he brings this kind of gravitas and just sheer villainy and malevolence to his role. He is very malevolent, but he's also complex. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But for the moment, he is fixated on putting Kull in his place, because Kull was making short work of a lot of mercenaries. It was all but doing musus. But the trouble is that where Kull was doing well, the Black Dragons weren't doing so well. The mercenaries were doing perhaps too well, and you don't want that to happen. So I do understand that point of view. Because most of the mercenaries are foreigners.
And it allows them to see if they need to up the training of Black Dragons. And if in a battle against mercenaries, which you don't know
which way they'll go,
you don't want your own force that you know is loyal to you to fall behind.
Yeah. The trouble is that Kull, though, has proven himself fairly loyal thus far and is fighting really well. Where this movie gets a little funny is when Taligaro addresses Kull directly. Now, real quick, he calls the Legion the Dragon Legion, but in the book it's called the Black Dragons. So there's a bit of confusion there about the name on our parts, but we'll just call it the Black Dragons because it sounds better to an extent. Although I believe the Black Dragons are actually from the Hyborian Age. But the Dragon Legion is very supportive of their general, who ends up commenting as he takes the axe, "This is for chopping wood. These are for war." And they grab two swords which have been set on fire. I'm not kidding there. They seriously do that just because they gotta prove how badass and cool they are. And he hands one to Kull only for him to decide, well, blindfolds are to be used, all while ditching his cape, because his cape wouldn't be very useful in a battle and would probably drag him down. So, yeah, you could already tell when he gets rid of the cape, he's a practical man. He's of the nobility, but he's obviously a soldier's soldier. He's not... He's more like Julius Caesar, in a way.
A cape is there just for the visual.
Well,
just the...
Well, yeah, but in the age of Charlemagne, it's also been shown that it's also good for a blanket when you're going to sleep.
Yeah, but going into battle itself, best to...
Yeah, sometimes a short cape isn't a problem, but a long cape like that, you would have to unfurl.
The only way it can work is with Batman.
Yeah, I guess. Or Superman. And then we get Taligaro, who has Kull blindfolded by one of his men. One of the men comes up to blindfold Taligaro, who accepts it a moment after Kull does, then pushes the guy into the water to his left so that Kull will be focused on that spot while he himself charges Kull. I'm actually going to say it's a fair move. There's nothing fair about war, and Kull should have known better, and he kind of should have maybe considered, this guy who's being a total jerk to him might cheat. And in war, I guess it's because I've read Musashi, the novel, I've read the Vagabondo thing, and I've read the Book of the Five Rings, that I'm like, there's no such thing as fair in a war. So now I do believe that you don't go after civilians because, yeah, that's just common, good sense. But in terms of warriors and soldiers in the ancient history, even in today's to an extent of war, it's like, well, all's kind of fair. And so, although I do believe chivalry should play a role, as should honor, because these are core concepts to humanity. But the trouble is, Kull falls for this hook, line, and stinker. And he is a stinker here. The fight that results is pretty one-sided at first because Kull is not... Well, he's basically flat-footed. He doesn't know where the guy is coming from, almost. And Taligaro is playing things very cleverly. And I think Howard would have approved of Taligaro's move.
Yes, and Kull should have known. The moment those blindfolds were put on, a fair just left the building.
Yeah. But when Kull smacks Taligaro on the rear with his sword, I mean, come on, that's obviously harassment of a very particular sort. Somebody should hashtag #MeTooKull. Like, come on, man. I'm only joking here. I'm being facetious. But the thing is, all the soldiers laugh because it is funny what Kull just did to Taligaro. And Taligaro freaks out, going, "Silence!" Obviously, he can dish it out, but he can't dish it in. Which makes me wonder about his backstory. Like, why is Taligaro so thin-skinned? Because it's not the kind of ordinary thin-skinnedness. It reminds me of James the First of Scotland. James the First was very thin-skinned, and when he ordered the Scots to stand down and stop opposing England, they laughed at him and spat on him and said no, and they wouldn't listen to him. They had no reason to. He was their king, but he had no right to tell them to stop supporting the French and start supporting the English. And James would later end up being a thin-skinned monarch, and Taligaro has a similar thin-skinned side to him.
I can imagine one of two directions. The first one, he's been spoiled his entire life.
Well, yeah, but I don't think that doesn't. No, he can't have been spoiled because he's a soldier.
Yeah. The other possibility that I could think of was he was essentially...
He might be illegitimate or something.
Yeah, and he was probably talked down and mistreated to the point where his self-confidence is zilch.
I don't know about that. I'd say, but if he's illegitimate and he's claimed his status of nobility or something, he might feel a little insecure about it.
That's
without
fair.
being talked down or verbally trashed. Because we've got to bear in mind, in ancient days, they'd be made of sterner stuff than we are today.
That's fair.
But on the other hand, there were men who were very thin-skinned and took insults poorly. And they would react violently. Taligaro is... It just seems like he's almost a William the Conqueror type. Or Guillaume le... I can't say it because, Guillaume l'illégitime, or William the illegitimate. I'll be polite. I don't want to get hit by YouTube, and I'd actually understand if they actually hit me there because it's not exactly an okay thing to call them anyone. But I'm just wondering about Taligaro's inheritance. Like, he obviously did inherit some sort of noble status, but he's so thin-skinned about his soldiers laughing at him. And this doesn't exactly make him... Well, it does make him a bit more of an interesting character. And this film does have some great writing and acting. So, not by every actor, because, Zoretta's in this film. But Taligaro's... Well, it's Thomas Ian Griffith. He's always great. But now we reach the point of the screenshot you see on the screen, because I really like this shot of Kull putting out the sword, because they were aflame, in the water in order to put an end to the noise exuded by the flames. And this is a great strategic moment as he realizes that the flames are more of a liability for him. And he'd rather work almost like a jungle cat against, or a tiger, you might say, because his totem animal, or, because I think technically his adoptive mother or something was a tigress. So, he's going to rely on those kind of well-honed strategies and tactics that he's used to in fighting against Taligaro, who, of course, is not entirely familiar with this side of Kull, because he knows Kull is Atlantean, but that's all he knows right now. But even though he's not familiar with this side of Kull gives himself away when he lets out a big roar, stupidly, and this alerts Taligaro, who immediately kicks him in the face, swipes and misses, and Kull's knocked on his rear into the water. With Taligaro looming over him and taunting him in almost as bad a fashion as the French might have done. And kudos to everyone who caught that Monty Python reference. Kull, not wanting to be taunted a second time, tears off the blindfold and accepts his defeat, realizing he has lost here.
And that takes a lot of wisdom. Sometimes...
Though his pride is wounded, and he is very visibly angered.
He may have lost the battle, but he could go and fight another day.
Yeah, that's true. But the biggest insult to Kull happens when Taligaro tells him, "All my men are of noble blood." Kull says, "My blood is as red as any man's." And Taligaro says, "Well, there's a place for everyone in this world, even a barbarian like yourself," which visibly affects Kull, who, humiliated and almost broken a little, picks up his battle axe and just stares at it long and hard, visibly affected by those words. Because he wanted into the Dragon Legion, he wanted to rise, he wanted to elevate his station in life. But he's been knocked down proverbially as well as physically. So that this is a massive defeat for him psychologically. And it's credit to this film, the director, and the actors that they managed to portray this so well. And even the music is really good here. So, though it's a short scene, you get a strong sense of Kull as the man. That he has his own thin-skinned side to an extent. But for the most part, this is the brooding guy we know from the Howard stories. He does brood very deeply about things.
He spends a lot of time in his own head.
When he shouldn't. I'm not saying he should always be acting impulsively. I'm just saying too much time in your own head is destructive to a person. I've been there, especially recently. So, Kull is a character whom, in this film, we're already seeing he broods and broods and broods. On the other hand, he is a fearsome force of nature in some ways. Kull throws his axe away and is laughed at, which seems to add to his... he almost seems red-cheeked, like just humiliated at the laughter, the sneering of these men, which we've all been there. We've all been humiliated like that. It's not a good feeling. It's terrible. That said, where Kull is utterly distraught, Taligaro is soon distracted by a messenger arriving to inform him that the king is slaughtering his heirs, which is a pretty shocking statement. And the sad thing is, this is something that has happened a few times in history. You need only look at, well, Roman history and Greek history, in particular the medieval periods of these two countries, as well as Chinese history. Oh gosh, Chinese history.
Boy.
China is replete with times when monarchs would just slaughter their own heirs just cuz. No, that's the reason. Just cuz. Thankfully, some countries like Japan and France never really got around to that. Whereas Volusia apparently has a bit of a history. Now, this is where I wish there was a Snake Men plot, because I'd be fascinated to find out, like if there was the Snake Man Shadow Kingdom idea interlaced with this movie, that could add a different kind of nuance to Borna's actions and why he would elect Kull as his heir. It could be both an act of spite, but also an act of gratitude and spite mixed together. But that comes next time. That's going to be the next video, and we're going to analyze that then. But for the moment, what I like is that you have Taligaro who's shocked, and the way the messenger says it breathlessly, like whoever that extra was did a great job. He generally sounds like a guy who's shocked and horrified, and he's numb with the knowledge that the king is slaughtering his own heirs. This is something that, though it happened a few times in history, it was never something that was well received. Typically, most cultures had, well, we know from the historic record, people would tend to go, what? Because your heir is your pension plan. Your children are your pension plan. Your children are your future. A society grows strong so long as old men and women plant trees that they'll never sit under, knowing that their children will sit under it. This is a historic fact. For someone to do something so malignant as to destroy their own children, especially when you are a monarch, is to destroy your own future. And that's the idea here. He's slaughtering his children when there's no need to. I suspect maybe the Crown Prince might have been scheming against his father, but we got to bear in mind, Borna's killing even the children. I believe we see the corpses in the next scene. But this is a shocking act by any stretch of the imagination.
There's a reason why Henry II, why
he never tried to really kill his sons.
Even though several of his sons would
have gladly killed him.
Yeah, and waged war against him.
Yeah. There's a reason why we still react with horror as humans to Stalin killing his own son. It's just incomprehensible to anyone, because that's your child, that's your blood, that's your future. And for Borna to do this is just horrifying. And I like how Kull sneers at this revelation. So, yeah, Kull ends up interrupting the conversation as he overhears and just mocks it, saying, "Noble blood all over the palace floor," which earns him a death glare from Taligaro, but it's such a great one-liner.
Such a great burn.
Yeah. And it's the sort of thing Kull would have said. But this kind of one-liner I don't mind. I actually like, because it's fitting within the context of the film. You see, I hate one-liners for the most part, because it's always pop culture nonsense like Joss Whedon does. I hate Joss Whedon dialogue. It's like, oh, let's compete to make all the pop culture references so that every character is interchangeable, dialogue-wise. Kull has a very distinctive voice in this film. And the thing is, he is saying a one-liner here in mockery, but also it's a bitter comment that he's making about how he is not a noble because he's considered inferior, and yet the nobility are going around slaughtering their own children. It's a concept that's even more out there for a barbarian, because to a barbarian, your children would be something that you would have to protect and whatnot, because he's truer to his instincts as a person. Because instinctively, humans have a natural desire to want to shield their children from danger, care for them, and nurture them till they're full grown. And Kull reflects those kind of sentiments. So for him to hear about this Caligulan type massacre is just beyond the pall. And so you have this interplay between two characters. Taligaro, is naturally horrified, but he is also seeing it as there's a place for it. There's a time and place for such comments, and it isn't for a barbarian or a peasant to make these kind of comments. Kull sees it as, well, it's open for criticism because look at this great crime Borna is committing. So they're coming at it from two different point of views. This one-liner is basically a showcase of how the two men are against each other. How different they are, but also how similar they are in that they both regard this sin with horror.
It's relevant to the entire
plot.
To the entire plot and scheme of things.
And like I said, there's great interplay between Taligaro and Kull. Honestly, Thomas Ian Griffith and Kevin Sorbo have great chemistry. I really wish that back in the day, maybe around 2000, they might have gotten Sorbo to play Kull in a TV series. Heck, even if they got him today to do that, I'd love that.
Agreed.
Sorbo is a good actor, and he actually read Kull. Like, he's obviously a fan, and he clearly was trying to stay true to the character and his voice, which I appreciate that, because I like Kull as a character, and I think that, you know, you got to veer close to it. Although there is a bit of the addition of one thing with Kull. In the original Kull stories, you could be excused for thinking Kull might be asexual because you don't get any insight into his sexuality. Whereas in the Kull movie, he's very much a womanizer. So, which the womanizer thing I actually think would be natural considering Conan and whatnot. And given Kull did inherit the harem of Borna. But it's not, it's more interjecture. It's conjecture, I mean. You have to interject that into the story. It's not actually part of the original canon. So there's a lot going on there. That being said, heck, even if we got an animated rated R TV series of Kull, with Sorbo providing the voice for Kull, that'd be great. I don't even mind if they got the original priest actor to play the voice of Brawl. That'd be pretty good.
Yeah. I would love to see that.
And maybe Thomas Ian Griffith to voice a character or something. But anyways, this is honestly one of... I love this scene. There's just so much at play here. The character relationships are really shown really well. And you also see the character conflict that presages everything that's going to come up in the movie. But anyways, hope you guys don't mind this slightly extended video and this different style. So this will hopefully be the kind of video we will make again in the future, but we're going to... So if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to smash that like and that subscribe button, as though you recall smashing his enemies with the axe by which he rules.